Faith and Politics, a religious publication, takes aim at President Trump, how he's responding. Missing Christmas, an update on Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, still recovering from a devastating fire. Forming a peaceful world. Pope Francis meets with the Secretary General of the United Nations, what they said in their joint video message. And the beauty of faith, what a painting of the nativity scene tells us about Christmas. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, December 20th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Jason Calvi. A prominent Christian magazine argues President Trump should be removed from office. The editor-in-chief of Christianity Today says the president has a grossly immoral character. But President Trump fights back, saying no president has done more for evangelicals. White House correspondent Mark Irons joins us with that story. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Jason. Christianity Today was founded by the late Reverend Billy Graham. The magazine called for President Clinton's removal from office after his impeachment and is now saying the same thing about President Trump. Tonight we're hearing from the president, Reverend Graham's son, and the man who wrote the article.
I grant that the Democrats have been partisan in their efforts to remove the president.
Mark Galli, the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, writes that Democrats have had it out for President Trump since the day he took office, but says the President of the United States attempted to use his political power to coerce a foreign leader to harass and discredit one of the president's political opponents. That is not only a violation of the Constitution, more importantly, it is profoundly immoral. President Trump quickly responded. With a tweet, he slammed the editorial and Christianity Today, describing it as a far-left magazine, or very progressive, as some would call it, which has been doing poorly and hasn't been involved with the Billy Graham family for many years. He continues, no president has done more for the evangelical community, and it's not even close.
His characterization of us as being far-left is far from accurate. We consider ourselves, and most people consider us, a pretty centrist magazine in the evangelical world.
Christianity Today began publishing in 1956. Today, the son of the magazine's late founder shared this. Yes, Billy Graham founded Christianity Today, but no, he would not agree with their piece. He'd be disappointed. Franklin Graham says his father voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and also shared one of the things he says Christianity Today is ignoring about President Trump, writing on Facebook, "For me as a Christian, the fact that he is the most pro-life president in modern history is extremely important."
Democrats now say there is no timetable to move the articles of impeachment in the House to the Senate, and that decision from Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is reportedly infuriating President Trump, and it puts his trial in limbo. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the president is, quote, demanding his day in court. Jason.
Okay, White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. Democratic presidential primaries begin in just 6 weeks, and 7 Democratic candidates debated last night in Los Angeles. The long, festering feud between Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg erupted over the role of money in politics.
This is our chance. This is our only chance to defeat Donald Trump.
With just 46 days before voting begins, polls show South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg at the head of the pack for Iowa's kickoff caucus.
This is important.
And his competitors are on the attack. Amy Klobuchar accused him of lacking experience, and Elizabeth Warren criticized him for fundraising from wealthy contributors.
The mayor just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine.
Abortion did not make the debate. Loyola Marymount University hosted it. Students for Life responded, saying it's disappointing that at a private Catholic university, no effort was made to ask all the candidates to justify their extreme positions on abortion, which our Catholic faith teaches is wrong.
Let's get that straight.
Former Vice President Joe Biden applauded Democrats for impeaching the president.
It was a constitutional necessity for the House to act as it did.
While Andrew Yang challenged his fellow Democrats to get past President Trump's impeachment.
We have to stop being obsessed over impeachment, which unfortunately strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be, and start actually digging in and solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place.
President Trump leads all top Democratic candidates in a USA Today Suffolk University poll released this week, beating Joe Biden by 4%, Bernie Sanders by 6%, and Elizabeth Warren by 8%. The poll results came as no surprise to the president's re-election spokeswoman, who says after yet another drab, pessimistic Democratic debate, it's even more clear why they felt they had to impeach President Trump. None of these characters has a chance. Joining us now for analysis of last night's debate is Philip Crowther, international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. Philip, welcome back. Now, the impeachment of President Donald Trump was the big news of the week in Washington, but the candidates didn't really dwell on it that much. Why do you think that is?
Clearly, they wanted to move on from the biggest subject matter that we've had in the United States, at least in politics, over the last few months. These were 7 presidential candidates on the Democratic side on stage who clearly wanted to move on from that subject matter. They were given the chance at the very beginning of the debate with the first question from moderators to address the impeachment of the president that had happened exactly 24 hours beforehand. They were asked what they would do to convince American voters that the impeachment of President Donald Trump was in fact the right thing to do. They did not necessarily directly respond to those questions. And that was it. From there on in, we moved on to completely different subject matters. And I think what we're seeing here is a Democratic Party that is not entirely sure that the impeachment is going to work out for them, because what it might well do, and this is certainly the president's point of view, it's going to motivate his voters. And I think you can see a little bit of fear in the Democratic Party that that might very well be the case. These are also candidates who've maybe been frustrated by how much that one subject matter has dominated the political debate and simply want to move on to those issues that they think will get voters on the Democratic Party's side in November of 2020. That's what we saw here on stage in LA.
So we did hear, they moved on pretty quickly. They did also touch upon a fair deal of contentious exchanges. Can you tell us about some of the highlights there?
Yeah, it was a pretty contentious debate, but relatively friendly as well. I think it was a constructive one, certainly, and one where there weren't necessarily any clear losers. There was, for example, that very contentious moment between Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, someone who is going up in those polls and is becoming a danger to Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. So there they were, standing side by side, and had a very extensive debate about campaign finance, essentially. Elizabeth Warren is a candidate who does not want to get big dollar donations from big money donors. Pete Buttigieg is somebody who has openly said that that is something that he welcomes, and that was the element of their debate. When it comes to subject matters, by the way, it was all across the shop. We got into pretty much everything here on this debate stage, and 2 subject matters I'd like to bring up that are particularly important to viewers. Abortion did not come up, by the way, in this debate, and that has largely been the case during these Democratic debates. Only 2 months ago in Ohio do I remember that it was a particularly important subject of debate. Then also when it comes to foreign policy, these were candidates who were asked about the rise of China and were asked about the persecution of Uyghur Muslims in that country, and they came out particularly strong on that matter. So those were 2 topics that we're not used to hearing necessarily on this debate stage. One came up, the other one did not.
Okay, Philip Crowther, thank you for summarizing this international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. Thanks.
Thank you.
The Trump administration is set to launch the Space Force. The president will sign the National Defense Bill, which creates it. It'll be the first new branch of the military in more than 70 years. At first, the Air Force will run the Space Force, and they'll have around 200 employees. In other space news, Boeing's Starliner capsule lifts off from Cape Canaveral. The test flight was set to reach the International Space Station later this week, but it quickly went off course, so instead it'll be brought back to Earth as early as Sunday. No people were on board. NASA expects Starliner to be ready to carry astronauts early next year. We're following a developing story overseas. British lawmakers gave preliminary approval to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit bill. That clears the way for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union on January 31st. The House of Commons voted overwhelmingly in favor of the withdrawal bill. It still needs to be approved by Parliament's upper chamber, the House of Lords. Protesters in India again rally against a new citizenship law. Police banned public gatherings in parts of the country's capital. They also cut access to the internet. At least 11 people have died. Police arrested more than 4,000. Critics say the new measure threatens India's secular democracy and instead turns it into a Hindu state. Wildfires in Australia turned deadly. 2 volunteer firefighters died Thursday after their vehicle is said to have hit a tree and rolled off the road. A severe drought, record-breaking heat, and strong winds have been fueling dozens of fires. It's in the state of New South Wales in southeast Australia. A state of emergency runs at least through Christmas Day. Notre Dame Cathedral will not be celebrating Christmas. That's the first time in more than 2 centuries. A devastating fire last April shut down the Paris landmark. Catholics try to keep the nearly 900-year-old church alive in exile with service, song, and prayer. Pope Francis meets UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He's the former Portuguese Prime Minister and a practicing Catholic.
Your Holiness, you are a messenger for hope and humanity, for reducing human suffering and promoting human dignity. Your clear moral voice shines through.
The two put out a video message urging the world not to turn away from injustices, inequalities, and scandals. The Holy Father also thanked the UN for its commitment to peace. The United Nations next year marks its 75th anniversary. Courtney Mares, Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency, joins us from Rome. Courtney, Pope Francis shared a strong message today. What was it?
Pope Francis said the world cannot remain indifferent to the attacks against human dignity today. He spoke of the importance of protecting all human life, including the unborn and all vulnerable people. He also highlighted the plight of migrants and refugees and said that the persecution of people on the basis of their religious belief is an injustice that cries out to God.
So then how did the United Nations Secretary General respond to those strong words?
The UN Secretary General also highlighted the importance of religious freedom. He said that it's tragic that this year, during Christmas, there's Christians who will be unable to celebrate the Christmas holiday in safety. He also highlighted UN programs to safeguard religious sites and to commemorate the victims of violence based on religion this year. The UN Secretary General also made an appeal to all nations to commit to carbon neutrality by 2050 and thanked Pope Francis for bringing attention to the importance of environmental protection in his encyclical Laudato Si.
And the Holy See has been what's called a permanent observer of the UN for 55 years. How do the two work together?
Reaffirming the dignity and worth of every human person is a core value of the United Nations, as the UN Secretary General said at the Vatican today. However, there have been times when the Holy See has chosen not to participate in UN-sponsored events due to an overemphasis on reproductive rights, as was the case with the Nairobi summit last month. But with their shared goals of upholding human dignity, the Holy See and the Vatican have worked together to promote peace, sustainable development, and foster respect for international laws and treaties.
Okay, Courtney Mares, Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jason.
Coming up, an order of Catholic priests and brothers celebrates nearly 2 centuries in an American city. Christmas is not a time of joy for everyone. About 20% of Americans feel very lonely or sad during the holidays. That's from a new poll from the Associated Press and Nork Center for Public Affairs Research. Another 20% feel moderately lonely or sad, but the majority of people still say they're grateful and looking forward to celebrating family traditions. Now a story of hope from Philadelphia, a city where more than a quarter of residents live below the poverty line, over 1,000 of which are on the streets. Colin Flynn brings us this story about the Vincentians, who have been in Philadelphia helping the poor for 170 years.
Yes, the neighborhood's a struggling neighborhood now. So, it went through its glory days, and now it's sort of back where it all began 170 years ago. There are people struggling, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of people in need. And so we continue to be here, we continue to walk with this population and share the faith with them, offer them hope. It's right where we belong. St. Vincent de Paul would be very happy with us.
For 170 years, the Vincentians have been committed to helping the poor and disadvantaged here in Philadelphia after arriving in 1849.
And they came here to do what they knew to do best. They spread the gospel. They tried to make Jesus real in ordinary, everyday people's lives.
The Vincentians had been founded 2 centuries earlier in France by St. Vincent de Paul around 1616, and they brought their mission to those in need all over the world, including Philadelphia, where they dedicated themselves to helping the poor and marginalized in an area called Germantown.
And there were difficult days when we arrived here 170 years ago.
Because the Vincentians weren't that welcome, Catholics weren't that welcome in the city, is that right?
That's exactly it. And we talk about that the embers of the churches burned by the know-nothings, that the embers were still alive. And so we came to Germantown, and the population, while the name may be Germantown, by then the population had become Irish. And there were signs posted everywhere: Irish need not apply for work, Catholics need not apply for work. And so the Vincentians accompanied those people in the early days.
Over the years, the Vincentians have had a number of ministries to help the homeless and those in need. One of the programs they helped establish is PAR, a computer and electronics recycling center which employs people who have been recently released from prison.
We source material, electronics, and we bring it back here and try to get the value out of it.
So you're almost giving the computers a second chance at life.
Same as what we do with our individuals.
How has this program helped you in life?
Because being here is a blessing, because people give you another chance at life to show you who you really are, because the mistakes you made in your past is not really you, and they don't judge you. Everybody here just trying to grow together.
Another unique aspect of the Vincentians in Philadelphia is that they have had a novena here every single Monday, unbroken since 1930, promoting the Miraculous Medal, which, like their order, originated in France.
With the sole purpose of promulgating the medal and the promise. The promise was come to the altar, and there you'll receive God's graces. The promise was wear the medal, and you'll be protected by the Blessed Mother herself. And you know, the medal was originally called the Medal of the Immaculate Conception. But people who wore it, miracles happened in their lives. It very quickly became the Miraculous Medal.
And after the crucifix, one of the most recognizable symbols in the Catholic Church?
It's the absolute second most recognized symbol of devotion, of relationship to God, is the Miraculous Medal. During the Second World War, there were 12 novenas a day. And they would say there were 10,000 people who would come every Monday. People praying for the protection of their children who were fighting in the war.
The Vincentians celebrate 170 years of service to Philadelphia and its people, and as we head into a new decade, they are committed to continuing to live out the mission of their founder, St. Vincent de Paul.
I feel like the mission of the community has only deepened, that to see our place among the poor.
When St. Vincent would speak about setting hearts on fire,
yes,
and speaking about setting the world on fire,
right,
what do you think he meant by that?
Setting the world on fire with love. Our greatest success in life will be measured by the amount of love we've extended to others.
In Philadelphia, Colm Flynn for EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, the beauty of faith, how a Renaissance painter depicted the birth of Christ. We're just days away from celebrating Christmas. So in these last days of Advent, we look at the beauty of faith in a painting at the National Gallery of Art. Joining me now is Jem Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith. Jem, welcome back.
Thank you, Jason.
So tell us about this painting. It's by artist Giorgione. Tell us about the artist, first of all.
The city of Florence was the birthplace of the Italian Renaissance, but soon after, many towns and cities across Italy became centers of Renaissance art and culture, like the city of Venice, where this painting was created between 1505 and 1510 by Venice's most well-known artist, Giorgione. Not only do we have this magnificent, fine piece of Venetian painting, we also have an image to help us as we continue our Advent journey to the great feast of Christmas.
Just a few days away from Christmas, we're looking at a depiction here of the Nativity. Can you tell us about this painting itself? What do you notice when you look at this as an art scholar looking at this painting?
So Venetian painters loved to set the gospel scenes in landscapes, beautiful landscapes. So that's what we see on the left side of the painting, is this very elaborate landscape with bright green trees. And then on the right side of the painting is a cave where Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are placed. And at the center of the composition are the shepherds, two shepherds. The shepherds were the first to hear the good news of Jesus' birth. And so they leave their work in the fields and they come to worship the Christ child on their knees. Notice their clothes are torn and tattered. Their feet are still muddy. They may be poor, but they are rich in faith. And so they come to kneel before the baby Jesus, who is the light of the world. Now look at Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Jesus is laying on the floor, the bare ground, but he's radiating light. He is the light of the world. And Mary and Joseph as well, they reflect that light in their beautiful robes. Joseph, look at the wispy golden hair and his golden robes. The Venetian artists often used ground precious stones into their pigments so that when the paint dried, the scene would actually radiate this golden light. So the whole scene really is about light and darkness.
I'm really curious because there's so much going on here, and I love the imagery of the shepherds in their torn and their tattered clothing. But there's also the green trees. We're talking about the Nativity in December. Why the green trees in December?
Yeah, and again, it's because the Venetian painters loved to show the natural world, and they would often set these beautiful gospel scenes. This is from the 2nd chapter of Luke. Set them against a very vibrant landscape. So it kind of looks like it's the middle of July, right? And yet what's really, what the contrast of light and shadow helps us to focus on the baby Jesus who's lying there on the ground and radiating this divine light into the world.
So as we look at this image, as we think about Christmas in just a few days, how can we take this image and apply it to our prayer life? What can we do meditating upon this image right here in front of us?
The theme of divine light shining into the darkness of this world really radiates across the Advent and Christmas scripture readings. So as we ponder this beautiful 16th century painting by Giorgione, I think we're invited to join the shepherds as they kneel before the Christ child, and to really let the heavenly light of God's love and healing fall into our lives.
Jem Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith, thank you for making this so beautiful for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
And we hope all of you are getting ready for a very Merry Christmas. I'm Jason Calvi, and for the entire EWTN News Nightly team, we thank you for watching tonight. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.